to get to know who I am? I think that's such a big question, right? Getting to know who am I really? And there are many ways to get access to who you are. And one of them is, like for me at least, is through yoga, knowing because it helped me become more mindful, more present, more aware first of my body. And the more I practice being mindful and being present and being curious, I think that's the most important value that I've gotten from it. It then helped me with noticing my thoughts, my patterns, which is touching more of the emotional side, which can be causing a bit more distress. So if I'm able to hold or have space for this discomfort and distress that comes with noticing the not so quote unquote like good parts, or not so maybe like the difficult parts of myself that I've been refusing to look at before.
Yeah.
So having that capacity to hold that discomfort through the practices of mindfulness and yoga or any other body awareness, this is right. Yeah, it made me look into it in a more objective manner.
Emerge Stories is a place where, as the name implies, you are going to hear stories. Stories from people all over the Philippines who have come from many different types of backgrounds, and especially people who have gone through struggles, people who have gone through the challenging parts of life. And I hope that these stories will relate for you in some way, that some of these stories will really land for you, because these people have gone through probably just about the same thing you might be going through right now. Welcome back to Emerge Stories. Today, our guest is Markie Silan. She is from the Manila area, and she is a very curious lifelong learner, an advocate of mindfulness, mental health, and social change. She's really passionate about helping other people, supporting other people in their self-discovery and growth. And she does that through coaching, through movement, such as yoga, and contemplative practices like meditation and mindfulness. So hope you guys are going to really enjoy the story of Markie and her personal growth journey, how she got on to such a dedicated journey of personal development. And we're definitely going to have her back on the show soon for the Emerge Coaches show that we're launching soon. And I hope you guys really enjoy the show. If there's something that you hear that's inspiring to you or that catches your attention that you feel is valuable, and if you know somebody else that you think would also benefit from that, I would ask you to just take a moment and share it with them and tell them why you enjoyed it, why you thought it might be meaningful to them. And that really helps us spread the organic reach of the show and the impact that we're trying to have. And also, if you have feedback or if anything that we're creating here is meaningful to you, we'd just love to hear it from you. It keeps us going, keeps us juiced to do the things we're doing. So thanks for being here, and let's jump in to the conversation with Markie. Markie, welcome to Emerge Stories. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Eli, and congratulations for this. Not anymore a project, right? It's really something that you've been doing for the past couple of months, and it's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about these conversations. They're really fun, and I hope that I think we're getting some feedback that they're meaningful to people. So I'm looking forward to helping you share yours. Let's start out a little bit. You are in Manila now, right? And is that where you grew up?
I'm in Manila now, yes. Ever since I started uni up until now, I'm working here, but I was born here. I got not really sick, but I was in and out of the hospital up until I was 3 years old. My parents moved to Cagayan de Oro down south.
Hmm,
I grew up there and wouldn't have it any other way, actually.
nice. So did you grow up speaking both Tagalog and Bisaya?
I grew up speaking both Tagalog and Bisaya, but also really had access to nature, something that we're not really getting too much here in Manila. Yeah, just a multitude of things over the province.
Let's start out before we go to your kind of a little bit deeper into your upbringing. Tell us a little bit about what are you doing these days? What keeps you busy? What are you passionate about? What are you doing? What's your work life?
Mm. Yeah. I guess it's different things. Like my main job, really, or responsibility right now, I'm engaged with an NGO here in Manila, and I'm managing a foreign funded project. So that's in skills training. It's really people development, workforce development, but also I'm really passionate about, let's say, social emotional learning. So we're starting to hopefully conduct workshops on that very soon. So anything about mindfulness and movement and the hobbies that I have on the side is also quite related to those. So yeah, just a spectrum of like project management,
What are those hobbies?
meditation, hobbies. Now I've gotten to capoeira just this year, which is also quite, I would say, yeah, more of movement, right? But also feeling of community. So in a sense, it's quite spiritual as well. I really like walking, nature meaning like the trees here nearby. Yeah, and just reading about the mix of science and contemplative practices. I'm really like fascinated about that.
Those some really interesting topics I'm looking forward to digging into more. You also teach yoga, right?
I do teach yoga. Right now, it's really more of like private practices, but have actually stopped quite the past few months because we're trying to roll something up for another project. But yes, I do teach the movement of yoga.
Nice. All right. So meditation, mindfulness, yoga, capoeira,
Mm,
contemplative practices. I want to go deeper into some of these things, but let's go back to your younger years and growing up. I'm really curious. How did you get to the place where you started looking into these things? Like, how did you take ownership of your own learning and growth? I guess, when did that start? Like, when did you start looking? When did you start
yeah.
discovering these kind of things?
I don't know. I think it really only hit me when I was early 20s after uni, right? It was when I was starting to work, but also I wasn't really in the job that felt most fulfilled. It was just maybe in my mind like a transition period. So it was a constant. I read this term somewhere the other day, like low grade panic. I have low grade
Mhm.
panic for how many years every end of the month or at end of the year feeling, oh, what have I done? Right? Am I really like progressing in my life? Am I really getting closer to maybe what I want to do? So it was just that, yeah, low grade panic.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So, are we talking about frequent evaluation of your situation and freaking out about it? Something like that?
Yes, freaking out about it. Yes, was just compounding, like freaking out a little bit, low grade, and then up until maybe your mid 20s, it was just like a full blown, not full blown panic, but it was just really hitting me. You're 25, like what do you really want to do, right? And I think it's really that period in my mid 20s where I really started to spend time to think about my thought patterns, right? My behavior, where they stem from, really tracking or yeah, the progress now and really trying to get to know who I really am, right? Which I think in hindsight, that's what caused this low grade panics and freaking out before because I wasn't really knowing who I was really, not knowing my strengths, my patterns, and so forth. So from then on, it's still an ongoing process and practice, which is really interesting as well. And I think it's going to go on until my last day here on Earth. So, yeah,
For
it's a
sure.
fascinating journey.
Learning is infinite. And any ideas that we have that there's some utopian place to reach where we've figured it all out or gotten
Mm,
everything just right is not the way we're at. That's not what we are or who we are. But going back to this feeling, I really want to dig in because I think so many people feel similar things like
mm,
stuckness or lack of progress, right?
yeah.
What do you think those feelings were coming from and how did it actually feel?
I guess it's different. I tried to think about it again, like what actually happened with me the past couple of years. And there are different layers. I think one is like the somatic or how our body feels or reacts to a situation, right? And it was more of like uncomfortable or the feeling butterfly in your tummy, which can be excitement, but also can be a little bit of anxiousness, right? So it's something like that. So it's really one knowing how my body responds to certain situations. Am I feeling comfortable? Is this discomfort? Is this a good discomfort? Or actually, is this being mindful and aware? One of, yeah, the somatic, the body, right? Responses. And the other one was really looking into now more the cognitive side. So it's like bottom up. So more of the cognitive side, meaning what are my thought patterns? Maybe what are my beliefs? May it be like conscious or subconscious beliefs that are preventing me from knowing who I am or getting to where I want. And just having different approaches to both addressing the body and the mind are big factors or help already in like determining who I am or knowing or coming back to my sense of self. And there are different practices that I think I did. I started yoga maybe 10 years ago already. At the beginning, I just really started just as an exercise. I think many people start doing that, but I really stayed in this practice because of the not just the mental calming effect, but also it was really a tool to get to know who I am. I think that's such a big question, right? Getting to know who am I really? And there are many ways to get access to who you are. And one of them is, like for me at least, is through yoga, knowing because it helped me become more mindful, more present, more aware first of my body. And the more I practice being mindful and being present and being curious, I think that's the most important value that I've gotten from it. It then helped me with noticing my thoughts, my patterns, which is touching more of the emotional side, which can be causing a bit more distress.
Mm.
So if I'm able to hold or have space for this discomfort and distress that comes with noticing the not so quote unquote like good parts or not so maybe like the difficult parts of myself that I've been refusing to look at before.
Yeah.
So having that capacity to hold that discomfort through the practices of mindfulness and yoga and or any other body awareness, this is right. Yeah, it made me look into it in a like in a more objective manner. And so that really propelled me into knowing more of myself.
So you had this period of time in your early 20s where you felt stuck. You felt like the things you were doing weren't leading you where you thought you wanted to go, or
I
and you had
sorry.
these, no, it's okay, it's all good. And so then, your way of solving that dissatisfaction, like this place, you say this low grade panic that you were consistently feeling. I think many people, including myself in those years, are looking for solutions to those feelings in
Mm,
situational changes. So, okay, the way that I'm going to feel better about myself and my life is by changing the outside world in the job that I have, or the place that I live, or the people that I'm with, or the relationships that I'm in. We always think that, I know I was making that mistake. It's like thinking
yeah.
that the answer is outside,
Yeah.
but you found the answer inside.
But actually, I really relate to what you're saying. I think the first few years of my 20s, well, maybe at 25, right? I was also trying to avoid this feeling of low grade discomfort because I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't have the tools to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. So I would always fill my time with maybe if I do more over the weekends, then that would make me happy or that would fulfill me. So my calendar was just booked. It was like, was filled with all the activities I could think of that I thought would make me. But at the end of the day, it's also feeling a bit empty, right? What is this for? And it's really, again, having the tools to hold the discomfort, to finally get to know who I am in the sense of what are my strengths actually, too. Like, not just having the capacity to hold the discomfort, but what are my strengths? What values do I hold in life? Where do I want to be? What people do I want to surround myself with that also are aligned with the values that I have? And being able to identify all these things like strength, values, where I want to be in the future, like a purpose of some sort. I think a mixture of all of those things can help me actually become unstuck or
Yeah.
propelled me out of that.
What do you think were some of the most, what did you get right? Because if I meet you not too long back and I think, wow, you're someone who clearly has taken a lot of personal ownership of your own reinvention, your own self understanding, your own growth. And not all of us figure that out on our own.
Mm.
We often feel stuck and dissatisfied, like we're not growing, not enough progress. We feel this low grade panic, but not everybody figures it out like you did. Is it curiosity? Is it asking the right questions? Like, how did you get on this path of discovery in the beginning?
I think there's a saying like, what you resist persists, right? And I was resisting like getting to know what's really causing the low grade panic. But because I started doing yoga, that made me more aware, or rather have had more space to hold the discomfort of the body. I mentioned earlier that it was a mixture of having that like feeling funny in the tummy, right? That can be excitement, but can also be a little bit of anxiety. I was able to hold that, become calmer, and in knowing that, okay, let's now tackle what's really going on. I'm not going to run away from it anymore, although it's still very unsettling and a lot of discomfort. But I said, okay, maybe now I can actually do it. And it started with that. I don't want to resist it anymore. It's becoming too much already. Like, I'm not satisfied. I'm not really happy or at peace, right? So I think the more I would have let it go on, the unhappier I became. And that realization made me really pause and think, okay, let's sit on this now. So one is having that tool already with being a little bit aware, but also having a buddy that I can talk to about it also was really helpful. That I wasn't going through it alone. It-
Okay. So who is the buddy?
That was my ex.
Okay. Did you discover yoga and some of these ideas of sitting with the discomfort from him, from other people? Like, how did you?
Yoga, that was me because there was a yoga studio nearby where I worked, where I lived before. And the people, my teacher as well, at that time, they also really practice mindfulness. So that's my first entry to those practices. And together with my ex, he was also quite curious about this other things like breath work. But also, I think we were at the same point in our lives where we were really questioning, okay, what do we really want to do? Where are we actually exactly in our lives? How can we be more loving to each other? And the answer to that was, how can I be more loving to myself first?
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. Beautiful. You've mentioned multiple times this concept of, you've used a few different words, but sitting with the discomfort or
Mm.
letting that stay there and not moving away from or trying to avoid it. And you also mentioned how you filled your schedule just so full, not realizing. I'm assuming you weren't fully aware that you were doing
Yeah.
that kind of to avoid
Yeah.
looking inside, right? This is one of the most important realizations of my life. And this book that I've been writing that's almost finished, called Scary Equals Happy, is all built around this premise that all of the growth and the best learning in life is on the other side of something uncomfortable. And that if we could notice that we're leaning away and instead lean in, that's where we learn everything. And, so I'm still trying to pinpoint, like, how did you first realize or decide that you needed to just sit with it? Was this something that you just figured out on your own? I got to stop avoiding this because it's so painful that it's just not working. What I'm hearing is, like, you said,
Mm.
what you resist persists. So you resisted for a long time. And then all of a sudden you just decided, all right, I got to sit with this. Was that at the same time that you discovered yoga and mindfulness? Kind of.
It was years after, actually. I can't really pinpoint
That's okay.
exact time, but I know it was about maybe 25, 26. Yes.
Okay.
Because initially in my early 20s, I thought maybe I'm just not in the job that I want. So
Blaming it on.
so I found a job that I really liked and really aligned to what I wanted to do. But still, my feelings before having that job were still the same. I have this already, but still, why am I feeling incomplete? So I think it was years, right? 5, 6 years of just having constant thought about that. And I think, yeah, it just came to a point sometime at that stage in my life where I really started reading like books, like self-help books or personal development books. I read a lot, like a lot of content, right? Thinking if there's something wrong or you're not really happy about, you read and like just get all the content and think that would make things better. I think I had like years of just consuming everything, personal growth related books. But still, it wasn't enough. Like I wasn't integrating the lessons that I have been learning in those books. And again, it was all like external. If I read books, maybe somehow by this, I would manifest that in the way that I'm acting. But it's just quite minimal, right? And it's not really the full embodying of those concepts and values. I
Mm.
haven't been dissatisfied. And
You think that if you hadn't read those books, do you think you would have been able to compare those concepts versus what you were doing or not doing or your behavior? Do you think that it was still really valuable or not?
I think it was still valuable. I've been getting a lot of information from that, but yeah, also still not enough because I was doing a lot of things on my own. And I thought that I will just be able to figure it out and do it by myself. And just recently, I think maybe like 3 years ago, I attended a course, right, together with I don't know how many we were then, but it was really a good support group where we just not only learned about the concepts of transformation and personal growth, but we also really helped each other out in these practices. So, one, having somebody or a group of people
Mhm.
supporting you through that journey, I think is the most helpful of all of the things that I've tried.
Wow.
Um, yeah.
Beautiful. That's really cool. This is something I think we haven't really talked about, and I haven't talked about that idea too much in these interviews in the past. My journey of deciding to focus more on who I'm becoming and just really focus in on personal development was very alone for, I think, yeah, the vast majority of the time has been mostly me doing it on my own, which I would also not really recommend. I think it's very slow and very difficult.
Mm,
And many people might not actually stay on that journey because of how difficult it can be. So having a community or a group of people around you that are on a similar journey and made a similar decision is critical, I think, are just so helpful, which is part of what we're trying to do with Emerge is to create a community for people to find others, which is I've found a bunch of people like yourself who nobody's like you, people who are also on a
mm.
journey of self-growth and trying to get those people connected to each other. What do you see as the biggest difficulties for people that haven't found any others, haven't found a community? If you're just doing it alone, why is it so hard?
I think it's two parts, right? One, it's difficult to tolerate the discomfort that comes with noticing yourself because a lot of things stem from like our past, right? How is it manifesting now? And I think that's one difficulty. Like maybe they don't want to face it, right? What we've discussed, we've been doing a lot of things outside ourselves to fill the dissatisfaction or what we thought was it. And the other is if I couldn't be curious about my own behavior, thought patterns, etc., it would be also difficult for me to ask help from another person. Maybe there's shame that's attached to it. Like I don't want to seek help because they might see that I'm weak and I want to have a facade that I'm okay. I think there's still a stigma of that. And maybe I haven't acknowledged that myself first. Or if I have acknowledged that I need support, maybe I am ashamed of seeking support. Or maybe I just don't know where to find it. That can also be one factor, right? Or I don't feel safe yet in opening up to other people.
Yeah. Have you ever felt like you were diverging, like your path, your decisions, your perspective was really separating from the people that you either grew up with or the people that you're typically surrounded by?
What do you mean? Like,
For me and a bunch of people I've talked to, making a decision to focus on growing yourself takes you, like you end up running into, you mentioned beliefs, for example, earlier. You realize, wait a minute, a lot of the things that have been programmed into me, I don't actually choose them. I don't, when I question them, they don't stand up. I don't want to hold on to them. And you end up going down a path that you end up seeing the world a bit differently than
mm,
people around you, or also just the people around you are still trying to fill their weekends with escapism. And so you end up with the people you grew up with don't often, usually don't go on that journey of personal development with you. Have you ever felt like it was difficult because of that at all?
I haven't actually thought about that.
You mentioned earlier that you did choose to surround yourself with, so maybe you didn't spend a lot of time feeling like you were alone in your circle, but you did
Mm,
mention that you started proactively choosing who to surround yourself with.
but that was also at the same time when I was doing that course with other people. So it was both a happy scenario or happenstance that I was doing more work on myself while being in this course. That's when I chose, right? Yeah, choosing as well prior to that course. But I think, yeah, good question, actually. Maybe a little bit of it because it's not really brought up in some of the conversations with some group of friends, although it's not uniform, right? There are people who also really ask questions or are curious about their self growth, and we can have like really good conversations around that. But in some groups, maybe also not, right? So I can't really say that the
So,
people I've surrounded myself before were also a factor in me not really allowing myself to seek support.
no, but you never found it
Mm,
necessarily problematic. Okay, that's fine.
yeah.
You were touching on something a minute ago that I'm curious about. You were talking about not being okay and the way you've been talking about the negative feelings or the uncomfortable feelings that you were feeling before that you were trying to avoid. You now realize that you never painted it in a light of not being okay, where you might be headed toward looking for a therapist. You were more point. Here's what I want to ask. What's
Mm.
your take on the difference between people, quote unquote, not feeling okay and needing or potentially seeking therapy versus potentially seeking a coach? In other words, do we need to medicate something broken or do we actually just need to focus on growing and improving ourselves? I know that's a really complicated question, but I think
Mm.
you're someone who might have a take on this. I just thought I'd ask if you're in that situation of quote unquote not feeling okay. How do you look at those two arenas?
I think it's always good that you can have somebody to talk to, right? Or to have somebody that can walk beside you to go through all this like sticky situations. Let's say I have a problem now with my work, for example. Like even having somebody to talk to about it, whether it's a coach or a therapist or a friend, opens up doors for you to think about certain areas of that particular situation in ways that you probably might not think about. And I think that's the beauty of having, I don't want to label it, it's a coach, it's a therapist. The point is there's somebody making space for you that you feel safe enough to open up with. And
Beautiful answer. Keep going.
yeah, and I think it's essential actually for people to have that and being open to that idea of just opening up to someone. And I wouldn't say it should be a coach or a therapist. I'm not the one to say who should that be. But again, it's just that's someone who you feel most comfortable and safest with.
I think you just hit it completely spot on that the label is irrelevant. It's really the value is that active listening. And so if you could break down, I have pretty clear perspective on for myself on the way I see what the value of those conversations with traditionally a therapist and now
Yeah.
more of a coach. And sometimes you have a really good friend who knows how to do this.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people just don't understand the value of that conversation. You just alluded to that as opening up. And
Mm,
first of all, what is the value? And second of all, what is active listening? What are the components of being a good listener, like being able to hold space? So the value and the method.
yeah. I think the value of it, for example, for me, if I were to, let's say I feel stuck, right? And doing it alone isn't working anymore. Probably another person, whoever that is, can provide me with one, a safe space to help me get to a place of calmness. I think our nervous system state also defines a lot of how we see the world, right? If I am in stress, I probably see the world as something that's not really kind to me, right? And so my options are very limited because I'm already stressed out, right? So having that space with someone who can support me to shift first my nervous system state into feeling that, okay, I am safe. And having that, so if you shift your nervous system state and having another person actually also help you go through the process of going through what's in your mind.
Yeah. Verbally processing.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
feel safe now that I can talk about it. And then, oh, I have other options actually, not just like two options that I've thought about before. There are many things that I can actually think about and process. And I can talk about this with someone. And so it opens up doors for me to approach what I'm going through right now. And that's actually quite freeing, right? Having that openness that comes from the safety of talking with somebody and having more awareness and calmness and presence, right, at this moment to see the different options.
So if you
Yeah.
wanted to be a good listener like that, you wanted to be able to provide that for someone else, what are the do's and don'ts?
Yeah. I think on the other hand, so that's one coming from the one seeking like a support or guidance. And then from the other perspective, if I am giving support to somebody, which I also do right now, my top priority is making this person feel that, that he or she is safe with me, right? That I am providing a space where you can feel comfortable. And so I usually start my sessions with some sort of mindfulness practice, right? I usually ask a person, like, how are you feeling today? And it's usually different. Like, I'm feeling so hyped up, too energetic, or I can't do anything. I'm really down, right? Or I'm just okay. Then, based on that, I try to find like a practice that can, one, maybe tone their energy level down to a place of comfort and relaxation, or push them a little bit up, or if it's just okay, just being aware of your surrounding. And I think not just one practice, right? It's not just yoga or breath work. It's different. And it's just really practicing what works for you, right? So there's one practice that would get you to that safe of, I feel safe. And if I can bring that person to that state of calmness, might not be super calm, but just enough to
Mhm.
have open their minds to curiosity, then that's good. And then we ask, okay, what's really going through your mind? Are there like blockages or constrictions? May it be in the form of still body sensations? Am I not opening myself up to feeling calm? Then maybe there's something there. Or am I having this thought that I couldn't do it or some limiting belief? That's another blockage, right? Or maybe in your surroundings, there's something there that's blocking it. So support another person. Or if there's, I'm also not just talking about myself, can be others also providing a safe space for other people. Yeah, basically compassionately guiding them through processing their own thoughts and making them or the other person find the insight that is already there within them.
Yeah.
But I don't give, or we shouldn't give them what we
The,
think is right. But
the advice is the don't. Yeah. Don't give advice.
ideally,
It's so
but
funny. Like,
sometimes it's so tempting to just say, hey, just
well,
do this.
I've talked about this a lot, and I think like my learning experience has been big in this area because I used to think, that somebody's in distress, or you think that they're suffering, or you think they're not doing well emotionally, mentally, whatever. And then your brain perceives that they have a problem, and that because they're talking to you, somehow you have an obligation to be part of the solution. And this is just wrong. It's totally wrong and it's mistaken. And it's actually so much simpler and easier when you realize that all people need is that safe space, no judgment, somebody who's curious and interested, somebody who isn't going to try to solve your problems. You specifically don't want them to be trying to give you advice or tell you what to do. That kind of really ruins the whole thing. You
Mhm.
just have to hold space. And we end up verbally processing through our own emotions and figuring things out often on our own. Yes, okay, some curious questions can really help. Like you said, compassionately guiding if you have that potential just to ask questions, but it's the focused attention and the holding space that makes all the difference. And so, just to wrap this topic up a little bit, I've noticed in this culture in the Philippines, and I've talked to a bunch of people about this that seems to be pretty much agreed. There's this repeated story that you shouldn't really burden other people with your problems because it's like you're dumping it on them.
Yeah.
But to me, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how this whole process works. Because if you realize how this works and people were skilled at active listening, they wouldn't be taking on any burden. In fact, as the listener, you get this amazing feeling that you were able to help somebody work through their
Mhm.
problems. Would you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit and talk about how you see that relating? Like, with the cultural tendency to withhold and not share?
Yeah. I guess there's two sides. One seeking for the help, and again, the other one providing the space and active listening. I think much of the difficulty comes from the one seeking support. I don't know how to open up,
Yeah.
or yeah, feeling that am I a burden? Am I asking too much of their time? It's that sense of probably, yeah, like I don't want to be a burden, or I don't want them to know that I'm struggling. And I think it's more challenging in that part of the relation, not the one probably.
Yeah.
Because
So
I would be, yeah,
let's focus on the people in anyone who's struggling, and there's that
mm,
potential feeling of shame, and then there's you don't want to dump it on other people. So
mm,
what do you think people could learn, understand, or shift that would help
mm.
them in that? If they're the ones struggling, what do you think could change?
I think I've been talking a lot about our somatic, our body sensations, right? And how this really, our nervous system states rather, and how this affects our behavior and the way we see the world. Let's say for me, coming from my experience before, like if I were to seek help, I feel contraction in my body, right? Ugh, like I don't want to do this. It's so
Like tightening,
uh,
right?
tightening, and like tightening in my tummy, my chest, right? Like, it's my body saying no. And I would probably, and I think this is like the prime value of just really self transformation and growth. It's really curiosity, awareness, presence. Yeah. That's three things I was saying. How can I be more aware? And how can I be more curious? How can I be more present? And if I'm able to identify, like, oh, maybe if I feel tightness, how can I feel like I'm opening up more first in my body, right, before actually seeking for help? And I think that's where the movement practices help, right? One doesn't need to go to class to be able to do this thing. It can be just like jumping up and down, right? Or like just moving, shaking, whatever you think would help you shake that contraction off is one thing. Then if you feel more comfortable in terms of how your body is responding to seeking help, then probably verbalizing, hey, I need help might come easier. Might, I'm just not sure. Maybe it could, right? Because one barrier is lifted a little bit already. And the other is just, if I were on the other position, if a friend is seeking help towards me, what would I
Mhm.
do?
Yeah.
And most likely, I would say, just come in to
Want to
ask me for
listen.
help. I want to listen.
Yeah.
And so maybe having that understanding that if I were on the other shoes,
Yeah.
I'd be open. But
Yeah.
those are difficult things to do.
They are, but I really think they're worth practicing because it's right there available to us. And we've got people around us who do care.
Yeah.
And I really like that. It's, hey, if I were that person, would I
Mm,
to be available? Yes. So why am I tricking myself? Why am I convincing myself that
mm,
somehow it's a burden or they don't want to bot? It's like I'm
yeah.
wasting their time. No, I think that's really a big realization for me is it's kind of like if somebody's trying to be hospitable or give you a gift and you deny it, you're actually removing from them the good feeling of giving.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the same thing when, somebody could actually be there for you. They get a good feeling too. So
Yeah.
we're blocking our friends or people around us. I also think that if we discover how active, the value of active listening and how it actually works, that we could go to our friends and say, hey, so I just need somebody to listen to me. And I just want you to hold space for me and not be judgmental and just be curious and be interested. But please don't try to solve my problem. Just be
Yeah.
curious. I
Yeah.
just need to verbally process with somebody. And
Exactly.
if we could coach the listener, oh, okay, that's easy. Because if you don't set that context, sometimes the listener slips into that thinking
Mm,
they have to solve it.
yeah. Most of the time. Yeah.
Even I still do that sometimes.
Same. I think it's a practice as well for the one trying to seek for support. And I think it boils down to knowing what I need and being able to verbalize what I actually need. And I think that's also one challenge, right? I think for me as well, like I wasn't that comfortable naming my needs. So
Naming your
asking
emotions.
for emotions,
Your
needs, right?
feelings? It broke up for a
Naming,
second. Naming your feelings. Okay.
sorry, yeah, naming my needs also connected, right? So that comes with emotions and feelings and so forth. And it's a practice. Like at first, it might seem uncomfortable, but if I do it more and more, the more easier it becomes, right? But also, the difficulty might also stem from not having previous experiences that allowed me or that showed me that it's actually okay to do it, right?
Yeah.
Because if I had that practice before, if I were able to see experiences or be in experiences that show me, that make me feel that it's okay to do it, then there wouldn't be any problem, or not a problem that it wouldn't be that difficult.
It's easier when and it starts looking valuable, like when you get a good
Mm,
feeling, if, it pays off, but you have to try it
yeah.
before you have any chance of getting a good result.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we should probably head toward wrapping up. I don't want to take up
Yeah.
your whole day, but before I ask some wrap up questions, I want to ask you just this one question. Where has your path diverged from, let's say, what other people might have expected from you? Has that been an experience of yours where you've chosen a little bit of a different direction than what was expected of you? Or do you think you've gone down the path that was laid out?
I'm not sure what was expected of me, actually. I think my parents gave me the chance to also explore what I want, right? They weren't dictating me what I shouldn't do,
That's good.
but I have my own like expectations of myself. Like maybe 15 years ago, I would say, oh, by 25, I should be like this, be a doctor, have a family,
So
like the usual like societal things. But
how's your
I think
perspective shifted on that then?
definitely it has shifted. Like 25, I still didn't have my together. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, it has been different. There is no particular milestone that I have to reach by a certain age. And I think that has been the biggest shift. And I think that has been the cause of my low grade panic attacks as well. Because I thought that by this age, I should have this. By this phase in my life, it should look like this, right? But I didn't have a North Star. I didn't have an idea, or maybe I have a slight idea, but I didn't have a fixed idea of actually what am I here for? What is the purpose of my being? And knowing my, again, strengths, values, reactions, thoughts, etc., not cemented, but supported that path towards being okay with, or not being okay, but actually really feeling comfortable that I am going through the right path, no matter how that looks like, as long as it's going to the North Star.
And what
And
has that North Star become for you right now?
it still is. And I really am so passionate about not just growing myself, right, or knowing myself more and more, being curious about all the things that I have to offer and this world has to offer, but also really supporting other people in their development as well. And I think whatever I do or steps that I take from here on out, hopefully, or should be actually leading to that North Star. And having that as a purpose, or I think as a mission,
Mhm.
makes being in the now more comfortable. Not comfortable, but
Yeah.
I'm actually
Sure.
happy. Even if days are difficult, I know emotions, like, it's part of life, right? I think being able to experience all the things that this life has to offer, if I am taking that step towards that mission, then that is
Reassuring.
happiness for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I did something so similar. Listening to you just reminds me of me in my early 20s, like really arbitrarily creating expectations for myself, setting ideas in my mind of where I should be by a certain time, and then consistently being self disappointed, which I think led to a lot of self criticism, self doubt, disappointment, dissatisfaction, which was useless. And these were just totally arbitrary, made up things. And I was so wrong. Like I just was
yeah.
creating the wrong picture in my mind. But if somebody listening is, let's say, in that same place, maybe they're in their early 20s and they're just thinking, oh, I should be able to do this by this time. Or if you could go back and talk to your 22, 24-year-old self,
Yeah.
what would you say? What would you share as suggestions to,
Suggestions for
you know,
myself.
sure.
I would say slow down, be curious, right? Be more grateful, and also know your values as well, know your strength, find people that will support you, support other people, and yeah, use all of them and all the other practices that you have been doing regularly every day, integrate them into your life. And yeah, ultimately, you're gonna be at peace with yourself. It's like also coming home, right, to yourself, which I think in my early 20s, I've been disconnected from. I think that was the reason why I was also doing a lot of other things because I just didn't know how to get to who I was.
Would love to do a follow-up, maybe short video or something on how you would recommend people discover their values, but I think we don't have
So yeah,
time for that today. But I love that list of suggestions you would have given your younger self. And if I were able to do the same thing, I think it would be a really similar list. I might add trust yourself, trust the universe, and learn to let go. And
I think that's another really big topic. That's also one of like my most biggest lesson as well for the past years. It's really how to lessen the tighten of your grip in life
yeah,
or with anything.
gripping.
It's a totally different topic, but also very important. And transformation and self growth, which I think can be a short next. There's so many
Oh,
things to unpack. So many
yeah,
things.
I will.
That's what makes it very exciting.
Let's look forward to part 2 then.
So
All right. So, real quick wrap up questions. If you think of yourself 5 years ago compared to now, what are some things that you're really proud of that you've changed or evolved?
I think I've never been more comfortable about myself in the past maybe 2, 3 years because I just know myself better. And again, that's based on what I mentioned earlier, right? I know my patterns better. I know my values better. I've been living it better. So I think that's the biggest change, which I'm really happy about.
So, self acceptance, just like getting to know yourself better.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. And just one resource that's been useful for you, like a specific either book, YouTube channel, influencer, just somebody out there that you've learned from that you would recommend.
Wow, I think so many things, so many good things out
You
there.
can throw a few out. It's
I
okay.
know. I think I mentioned this to you before as well. It's a book. It's called right. I really like it because it's a mixture of science and psychology, but also contemplative practices
In touch.
in touch. But it also gives like practical exercises as well, both on in like body, thoughts, spiritual aspect of it. For those of you who are into that, into just how can I be more open, aware, present, connected, right? How can I feel most alive
Nice.
and not just excited with life, but actually alive and how to live it? So, one of the really good books out
Cool.
there.
I have not read that one yet. Thank you for the recommendation. Marky, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And as always, I am reminded when I talk to you about how much work you've done on yourself. And I love the fact that you have this North Star of wanting to
Mhm.
help other people grow. So thank you for the support so far with what we're trying to do with Emerge. And I'm really looking forward to how we might be able to support more people together and build a community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Likewise, Eli, I think it's a very important project and I'm looking forward to actually touching more people with it. So, see you in part two, Eli. Thanks,
See you soon.
everyone. Yeah, see ya. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this interview on Emerge Stories. We really hope that something here sparked your curiosity or maybe helped you think about something in your life just from a little bit of a different angle or perspective, maybe opened up your mind to something you might be able to do in your life to take more ownership of your own learning and growth. That's the goal of this show. So please join our community, like and share, and tell other people about these stories if they're meaningful for you. And thanks so much for being here.